You never think your life is going to fall apart at 55. Not after everything you've already been through. Not after you've survived grief once. But I'm living proof that sometimes the second fall hurts worse than the first. My name is Daniel, and this is the story of how my second marriage almost cost me everything: my dignity, my sanity, and nearly my life. It started 5 years ago at a gravesite. I lost my first wife, Carol, to cancer. We'd been married for 27 years. She was my best friend. We raised two beautiful kids together, both grown, both gone off to live their own lives. When she passed, it felt like someone ripped the roof off my world and let the storm pour in. The days that followed her funeral were a blur. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I sat in her chair every night trying to smell the last bit of her perfume before it faded. I didn't know how to be alone. I didn't know how to start over. Then, out of nowhere, I met her. Her name was Vanessa. She showed up at the community grief support group my daughter begged me to attend. She was beautiful, much younger than me, maybe early 40s. Long dark hair, warm smile, eyes that studied you like they were reading your soul. She had also lost someone, her father. She said it left her hollow inside. We talked after the session, then again the next week, and the week after that. Looking back now, I wonder if she ever actually cried in those meetings. She always had perfectly done makeup. Not a smudge, not a tear. But back then, I wasn't seeing red flags. I was just seeing someone who made me feel less alone. 3 months later, we started dating. My daughter didn't like her. Said something about Vanessa felt off. My son was indifferent, too busy with his own life to notice mine was changing. I ignored my daughter's warnings. Told myself she was just being protective, maybe even jealous. I mean, who wants to see their dad move on so soon? But here's the thing. Love doesn't always come dressed like love. Sometimes it slips in wearing the mask of comfort while hiding chaos underneath. Vanessa moved in after 6 months. It felt fast, but I was tired of empty beds and microwave dinners. I missed warmth, companionship, the sound of another person brushing their teeth in the morning. She made me feel alive again. She laughed at my dry humor, made elaborate dinners, introduced me to yoga and meditation, but little cracks started forming. Things I ignored because I didn't want to lose what I thought I'd finally regained. She had no job. Said she was finding herself after years of working in corporate. Okay, fine. She didn't like when I spent time with my daughter. Called her judgmental. Said she gave off bad energy. She asked questions about Carol. Too many questions. Where her jewelry was? What her life insurance payout had been? She even once asked, "Do you still think about her when we're together?" I laughed it off, but she didn't. Still, I married her. God help me, I did. The wedding was small. My daughter didn't come. My son stood awkwardly beside me as best man, but his eyes didn't smile. I should have known something was wrong on our honeymoon. Vanessa flirted openly with the bartender, said it was just harmless fun. I was too embarrassed to cause the scene. I let it go. But I noticed she never really looked at me the way Carol did, never really saw me. It was like I was a placeholder, someone to fill the void until someone better came along. Then came the money. She wanted to renovate the house. Said it didn't feel like hers. I agreed. Then she opened credit cards in both our names. Took out loans I didn't know about. All under the pretense of building a future. She drained my savings in under a year. When I confronted her, she cried. Said she was trying to surprise me. Said I made her feel like a criminal. Then, somehow, turned it around and made me apologize. I started sleeping in my office some nights. Told her I needed space. But every time I tried to leave, she'd reel me back in with promises and tears and late-night confessions that sounded rehearsed. It was like living with a stranger who wore my wife's skin. Then the real nightmare began. I started noticing things. Missing packages, strange charges on our joint account, hotel rooms in the middle of the day, rideshare pickups from addresses I didn't recognize. Once I came home early and heard the back door slam. She said it was the wind. She was always on her phone, always smiling at texts she wouldn't let me see. I told myself I was being paranoid, that grief was making me suspicious, that maybe I was just afraid of being left again. But deep down, I knew. One night, I followed her. She said she was going to her book club. I waited 5 minutes after she left, then tailed her from a distance. She didn't go to the library. She went to a cheap motel on the edge of town. I sat in the car for over an hour, heart pounding like it was trying to escape. My chest. I told myself she could be meeting a friend, maybe someone from the grief group. Maybe it was all innocent, but she came out 2 hours later, fixing her hair. She didn't see me. I didn't confront her that night. I couldn't. I drove home shaking, barely able to keep my hands on the wheel. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't breathe. I kept asking myself how I got here, how I went from holding Carol's hand in her final moments to hiding in the dark, like some spy in a bad movie watching my new wife lie to me. I felt stupid, old, used. But it was about to get worse. Much, much worse. 2 weeks later, I came home early from work. Something told me to call it instinct, call it divine intervention. I don't know. I parked quietly, entered through the back door. The house was oddly quiet. Too quiet. Then I heard it. Laughter, male voices coming from our bedroom. I crept upstairs. My heart was hammering so loud. I was sure they could hear it. And when I opened that door, what I saw changed everything. I stood frozen in the doorway. The world slowed down, almost like time itself held its breath. The voices, the laughter went silent the moment they saw me. 3 pairs of eyes locked onto mine. Vanessa didn't even flinch. She sat there on our bed, my bed, with 2 men I'd never seen before. Both were younger. One had a smirk on his face like it was a joke. The other looked uncomfortable, as if he hadn't signed up for being caught. And Vanessa, she just looked annoyed, like I'd interrupted something mundane. I didn't yell, I didn't scream, I couldn't. My voice had left me, my chest burned, my head spun, but no words came out. I just stared. Vanessa stood slowly, wrapped in a robe she had once claimed was her favorite because it made her feel like a queen. She had the nerve to tie it calmly, then walk over to me like nothing had happened. "You weren't supposed to be home," she said. That was all. Not sorry, not shocked, just irritated. I backed away. I needed air. I stumbled down the stairs, grabbed my keys, and drove. I didn't know where I was going. I ended up at a gas station 2 towns over, sitting in the parking lot like a man who'd just survived a car crash. Maybe I had, just not the kind you can call an ambulance for. I must have sat there for over an hour. At some point, I realized my phone was buzzing nonstop. Messages. Vanessa, of course, not apologizing. Oh no. She was blaming me. "You're overreacting. You pushed me away. You never really let me in. You were always living in Carol's shadow." I couldn't believe what I was reading. She was twisting the knife, and I let her. That night, I didn't go home. I drove to a cheap motel and checked in. I stared at the ceiling until the sun came up. The next morning, I called my daughter. I hadn't spoken to her much since the wedding. We'd grown distant. Vanessa had always made it uncomfortable when she came around, so she stopped. But the moment I heard her voice, I broke. I cried like a child, like a man who had lost everything twice. She didn't hesitate. "Come stay with me," she said. "You don't need to be there with her." I moved into her guest room that afternoon. She hugged me longer than she ever had before. There were no "I told you so," just love, just presence. I didn't deserve that kind of grace, but she gave it to me anyway. The next few days were a blur of shame, regret, and confusion. Vanessa sent more messages, sometimes angry, sometimes seductive. She tried every angle: manipulation, guilt, even charm. She said the men meant nothing, that it was just a thrill, that I could forgive her if I really loved her. But something in me had broken. Not just trust, not just the illusion of love. Something deeper. Something I didn't know how to fix. And then came the bombshell. One morning, my daughter sat me down and placed a manila envelope on the kitchen table. I hired someone, she said, a private investigator. I stared at her, confused, hurt. I had to, she continued. I needed you to see what I've been trying to tell you for over a year. Inside the envelope were photos, documents, logs. Vanessa wasn't just cheating, she was using me. There were transactions linking her to someone running scams online, fake business names attached to my address, a second phone line I never knew about. But the worst part, she was still legally married to someone else. The marriage certificate we had, it was void. Her divorce had never been finalized. She knew she lied. She married me illegally. Everything had been a performance, a con. I wanted to throw up. My daughter sat silently as I stared at the evidence. I felt sick, not just from betrayal, but from the realization that everything I'd built after Carol died was a lie. Vanessa hadn't just broken my heart. She had dismantled my life brick by brick. I contacted a lawyer immediately. He looked at the files and shook his head. "You're lucky," he said. "This marriage isn't valid. You could press charges. At the very least, you can have her removed from your home and accounts." That word, lucky, hit me hard. I didn't feel lucky. I felt like a fool. But maybe he was right. Maybe surviving this was a kind of luck. When I finally went back to the house, it was to change the locks and start sorting through the wreckage. Vanessa wasn't there. She'd left, thankfully, probably onto her next mark. The place felt different, cold, empty, like it had never truly been mine since Carol passed. I walked through each room slowly, touching the walls, the furniture, the things that had once made it home. I found an old photo of Carol and me in the back of the drawer in my nightstand. It had been pushed behind some papers, maybe intentionally. I held it in my hands for a long time. That night, I opened the safe. Not for money, not for documents, but for the gun I kept locked away ever since Carol got sick. I don't know what I was thinking. Maybe I wasn't. Maybe I just needed to feel something. Power, control, closure, anything. I sat on the bed and held it. Not in anger, not in revenge, just in silence. And that's when my phone rang. It was my daughter. "Dad," she said, "please tell me you're okay." And just like that, the fog lifted. I looked down at my hands, and for the first time in weeks, I realized I was still here, still breathing, still able to choose who I wanted to be next. I put the gun back in the safe, locked it, and walked away. The next day, I met with a therapist. My daughter drove me. I told the whole story, every moment, every wound. And for the first time since Carol died, I didn't feel alone. It's been 6 months now. The legal process is almost done. Vanessa hasn't contacted me again. She probably knows I'm not the man she can twist anymore. I've started volunteering at the same support group where I met her. Funny, isn't it? Life coming full circle, I don't trust easily now. I'm cautious, maybe even a little jaded, but I'm also healing slowly, quietly, steadily. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Grief doesn't end. Betrayal doesn't vanish. But with time, with truth, we can still rebuild. Even from the ashes, even when it feels impossible, even at 55. The hardest part wasn't walking away from Vanessa. It was forgiving myself. I thought I had done everything right. I waited years after Carol died. I stayed faithful to her memory, respected my grief, and tried to be cautious with my heart. But even with all that, I still ended up on the floor, gutted by someone who only ever saw me as a target. In the months after it all fell apart, I began to understand just how deep her manipulation went. She hadn't just lied. She had studied me, memorized my vulnerabilities. She knew when to be soft, when to pull away, when to cry, and when to laugh. It wasn't love, it was performance. And I was the perfect audience. But that's the thing about manipulation. It works best when you're starving for connection. After losing Carol, I wasn't just lonely. I was desperate to feel normal again, to build something again. Vanessa wasn't my second chance. She was my escape from silence. I see that now. Therapy helped. It didn't fix me, but it gave me tools, words for what I was feeling, space to admit that maybe I'd ignored the red flags because I wanted to believe so badly. That wasn't weakness. That was hope. And there's nothing shameful about hope, even when it leads you into the fire. My daughter was my anchor. She checked on me daily, reminded me who I really was, even when I didn't believe her. I still remember the night I broke down in her kitchen, not from sadness, but from gratitude. We sat on the floor like we used to when she was little, and I told her everything I had been too ashamed to say before. She didn't judge me. She just listened. It was the first time I truly understood the power of unconditional love. And slowly the pieces started to come back together. I filed paperwork to officially annul the infant marriage. My lawyer made sure Vanessa was removed from any property rights. And I changed every account, every password, every lock. I even sold the house. I couldn't stay there. Too many ghosts, too many lies soaked into the walls. I used the money to buy a small cabin about an hour away from my daughter's home. Just a simple, quiet place surrounded by pine trees and the kind of silence that doesn't feel empty. I spent my mornings walking trails, listening to the wind, and letting my mind finally breathe. For the first time in years, I was alone, but not lonely. I picked up painting again, something I used to do when Carol was alive. Back then, I painted because she loved to watch me. Now, I painted to remember who I was before the pain, before the loss, before Vanessa. And one morning, as I sat by the lake near my cabin, I realized something strange. I wasn't angry anymore. Not at Vanessa, not even at myself. I was just tired of carrying it. So, I let it go. Not with some grand ritual or big speech, just a quiet decision made between sips of coffee and the call of distant birds. I forgave. Her, not because she deserved it, but because I did. Months passed, the world kept turning, and life surprisingly started to feel okay again. Then came the letter. It was handwritten, the envelope soft and worn, like it had been carried around for a while before being mailed. No return address, no warning, just a single line on the back. Please read this. I opened it slowly, expecting venom or blame. But what I found was something else entirely. It was from Vanessa. She said she was sorry, not just in passing, but in detail. She wrote about her upbringing, abuse, instability, manipulation. She admitted she had been living a double life long before she met me, that she didn't know how to receive love, only how to take advantage of it. She claimed she'd started a therapy, that she was trying to change. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She said she didn't deserve it. But she wanted me to know that meeting me, hurting me, was her breaking point. I didn't know how to feel. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just stared at the pages for a long time, then placed them in a drawer I rarely open. Do I believe everything she wrote? I'm not sure. Maybe part of me hopes it's true, that maybe in some way all the pain wasn't for nothing, that she'll never do to another man what she did to me. But I don't dwell on it. That chapter is over. These days I spend my time on the little things, planting vegetables, walking the dog my daughter rescued for me, reading books I'd meant to finish years ago, painting more often, watching the sunset without needing to numb the loneliness with noise. One evening, I invited my daughter and her husband over for dinner. As we ate on the porch, she turned to me and said, "You seem different, lighter." And I smiled because I was. I never imagined my life would look like this in my 50s. I thought I'd grow old beside Carol, or at the very least, not have to rebuild myself from the ground up after a second heartbreak. But here I am, still standing, still learning, still open to the idea that maybe, just maybe, the best chapters of my life haven't been written yet. If you're listening to this and you've been betrayed, if you've poured yourself into someone who only saw you as a means to an end, let me tell you something I wish I'd heard sooner. You are not weak for trusting. You're not foolish for loving. You're not broken because someone else chose to break you. You're human. And that's a powerful thing because it means you can heal. You can rise, you can rewrite the story. Even when the last chapter nearly destroyed you, I did. and I'm still here breathing, believing, becoming. So, wherever you are in your story, don't stop. Keep turning the pages. You might be one chapter away from the peace you thought you'd never find. And trust me when I say it's worth it. Every scar, every tear, every step, it's worth it because you are. If this story moved you or if you've ever experienced something similar, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever trusted someone so deeply only to realize they were never who they claimed to be? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And if you found this story powerful or relatable, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. Your support means more than you know. Thank you for listening.